All right, and let me spotlight. Give me a second, guys. I'm All right, there we go. Good morning. Happy Friday. We're recording, we're getting started. Today is a really good day because we have a really special guest on this morning with us. And Richard, thank you so much. And we're going to get in a really good conversation. When Richard and I have been talking that really the last week a lot about all of these changes with NAR and the settlement, and just in case you guys haven't been to any of your team meetings, here really the details of this settlement with NAR, please go back and watch the recordings. I know all of the team meetings had spoken about it. And so really roughly the two major changes and details that we have to our industry, one being we're going to need to use the buyer broker agreement. That's not going to be an option anymore, even though attorneys for years have suggested that we use it in our businesses, not only to help protect us, but to, of course, protect the commission, the brokerage, and the buyer. And then the second piece to this is that compensation will no longer be listed on the MLS. Now, key important facts before we get in this conversation. It's important to note that please follow any of your broker's advice here. If you guys are getting something told to you, you're not sure about specific situations or details, reach out to your leadership team. But anyways, that was a bird's eye view of what's happening. I don't want to have that take up the whole call, but I do want to talk to Richard a little bit, you guys, before we even get started. Richard, how are you taking this news? What are you saying to your clients and your team, et cetera, now that all of this is happened? So, Richard Chung.
Well, thanks for having me. That's a great question. I may even have a different take than at least what I'm hearing, and I could be totally wrong with what I think is going to happen. That could be the case, and I think the point is we just don't know for sure how the market's going to react to
Right.
all this. And I don't know if you just saw Compass just settled as well. We just got news of that. So, people are settling and changing things. Uh, you know, we got wind of this all happening a couple of years ago, all of us. I mean, if you've been keeping up with real estate news, the Sitzer Burnett case, we knew about this a couple of years ago, and people were throwing it out there. Get your buyer broker agreements signed. And so our team, I mean, I'm just extremely proud to say our team's been getting this signed. It's been a priority for us where we don't work with the buyer. And the standard on our team is you don't work with the buyer unless you have this buyer broker agreement signed. We've
Mm-hmm.
got to have this thing signed. We've got to have the commission in there. But
Mm-hmm.
now it's not all that easy. Initially that conversation was much easier to have that signed when we're saying something along the lines of, by the way, this 2%, 2.5% that we're writing in here, I know it says buyer's paying it, but don't worry. It's gonna, the seller's gonna be covering that. That's standard. And then the buyer's like, okay, sure. Where do I sign? I guess if I'm not paying a single dollar out of pocket, no problem. So where do I sign? Now I think the conversation is going to be much different.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think the fear there of agents and we've talked about this, we mastermind that it's that they don't want to have that hard commitment conversation with a buyer at that time. And the good thing is the blessing out of this that we've been given is this is an industry-wide standard now, and it will be eventually mandatory in every office when it comes to file compliance. So the good news is that you all are in the same exact boat as your partner next to you, as everyone here on this call. You're not going to lose a client because someone says, "Oh, well, they're not having me sign this document." Right, Richard? You're going to have that opportunity there. I love that. So how are
Well,
you? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just want to say, I mean, really, the competition that we are going to face are going to just be really against ourselves. Let's say they just don't want to sign it, and we're going to be competing against listing agents taking their
Mm-hmm.
own buyers. So that's going to just have to be something that we're going to have to be ready for.
Mm-hmm. So let's explain that and talk about that just a little bit more, before we move on. So you're kind of projecting that you're seeing that maybe more clients are going to reach out to listing agents. Where's the opportunity there, on both sides, do you think? Like as a
Okay,
listing
so
and as a buyer's
look,
agent?
everybody from the beginning of real estate time has been talking, hey, go after listings, be a listing agent, listings leverage, and leads. Well, that wrong order, but you know what I mean. I agree to I 100% wholeheartedly agree to that of going after listings. However, don't sleep on the buyers. So here's where I think it's going to change. And this is what I feel like, I'm reading, I'm listening, I'm watching a lot of stuff on this. What I think is going to happen is your buyer appointments are going to be listing appointments. It's going to be the same case. Agents
Yeah.
are going to now be able
Yes.
to, and they're going to want to shop around if they feel in some ways, and not all cases, of course, because commission still could be covered with, by the seller, but they're going to think in their own mindset, well, who am I going to really hire? And so buyers agents, where it was more of a matter of, oh, whoever, I mean, we hear this a lot. Oh, whoever finds me the house. I'll work with 3 or 4 agents that are sending me homes. Whoever finds me the house, that's the person I'm going to go with. Well, I think that one thing that has to change is you have to stop making yourself look like I'm the guy that helped you find a house. My
Yeah.
buyer appointments, my buyer consultations, I always include something in there about how to find your home. And I tell them this, finding your home is actually the easiest part. My 12-year-old son could go online, can go on Zillow, Redfin, and put in the search parameters and find you a home and email it to you. He knows how to email it to you too. It's not that hard to find you a home. But if all their buyers are seeing is you as the home finder, people say I'm the fetcher, I'm not the catcher. I'll go find you the right home. I just think that value is extremely small because that's something that the buyer can do themselves. So we have to sell ourselves with much more value than just finding the right home. I think that's a big mistake that we've made. We've completely devalued ourselves because it's changed. I mean, back in the day, the MLS was in a book. The public didn't have access to it, to the properties, but now they do. So, and we've been so behind on adapting on what our value is.
And I think, industry over the last, 3, 4 years, obviously has changed a lot more. But looking back, it's like you show up for a buyer's consultation, and a majority of agents, you're a glorified order taker at that point.
Yep.
What's your bedrooms, what's your bathrooms that you're looking for? And I completely wholeheartedly agree, Richard. We have to look at the buyer's consultations as the most important key part of building a relationship with our buyers, and show up to them like we would a listing appointment, right? And you
Yep.
and I have gotten in many conversations about this, that when you go on a listing appointment or as a listing agent, when you're really dialed in, the dialogues you're using, you're showing up with, oh yeah, good, I love that thumbs up, because that's just double thumbs up. That's what we need. But you show up with comps. You show up with examples of your marketing. You show up with a strong value proposition. For 6%, I'm going to get you, we're going to do staging, and I'm going to do open houses and blah, 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 right? You have your value proposition. And then as a buyer's agent, it's more about, taking that order and looking for that house. Gary Keller said during his vision speech, they had a slide, which I thought was really interesting, that still the consumers, when polled, value the most an agent's resource to help find you a home. And that doesn't necessarily even mean in the regular search patterns or on the MLS. They do value that relationship, but many other things below that, negotiating is very important, experience, connection with offices and other agents. So there's so much more we should look for. Richard, what does that conversation kind of look like when you sit down with a buyer and you're articulating that value on your team or as an agent?
So that's a great question. And it's really tough to answer that question without really giving the big picture. So it's just like now, I mean, they're very similar to my listing appointments. I mean, we're going through a needs analysis. Okay, what are you looking for? What do you need? And then I have them really, we use a scale of 1 to 10. How familiar are you with this buying process? They're usually going to give you something at the best, at best, it's a 7, is what we usually hear. It's never a 10. So now my job is to, okay, I want the buyer to see and have self-awareness that, well, I need an agent. I'm not at a 10. I need an agent to guide me through all this. And so if I can show them, hey, I'm going to get you to a 10. Why is that important? You're going to be making so many decisions along the way. And I almost in a way make the decision of choosing the house, I just make it look like that's nothing. That's a easy decision. When you know. But there are going to be so many other decisions out there that, hey, what happens to your deposit? What happens if you need to cancel? What happens if you do this? And so then I say, and then as I guide them through it, throughout the conversation, I'm tying them down. Do you feel like you're getting closer to that 10? Do you feel like you're getting closer? Okay, good. Hopefully we're going to get you to a 10 by the end of this conversation. And then you're going to decide whether I'm the right person to represent you in this entire transaction. And here's why it's important to have me represent you, because then now you're fighting against dual agency, which is a whole nother topic. What we're trying to basically say is, and look, we've heard the whole, hey, would you go to court with, no attorney? Would you go, do your taxes on your own? We've heard those arguments. I think those arguments can work very well as well. What I'm looking at is this. Look, and by the way, this conversation is going to change, but my conversation used to be this. Without an agent, if you're going directly with the listing agent, can I share with you what really scares me about that? And when you ask that question, their ears perk up like, well, what scares you about that?
Yeah, they hear scared. Right.
Yeah, they hear that key word, and then they're going to ask, well, and again, this is going to change, and I think I have a way to change this. Before, most of these listings, they're going to pay, let's say, X amount of dollars. And now the listing agent's going to get more of the pie by representing both sides. How sure are you that that listing agent's going to guide you properly, even if it means you should be canceling that transaction, when he's going to be making essentially double the money? I mean, he's seeing dollar signs in his eyes. Is he going to really guide you, with your best interest in mind or the seller's best interest in mind when he's going to make double the money? I mean, for agents, I'll just tell you right now, for agents doing both sides, eating the whole chicken instead of half the chicken, I mean, that's like a big payday for agents. Are they looking at dollar signs or are they looking at this? And the whole dual agency thing is just, I don't even know how long that's going to last here in California now with all this.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting in this situation because it might guide some clients to the listing agents to try in the attempt to save money. And there's always going to be consumers that are out there that are trying to save money, nickel and dime, and get the best deal possible, right? We always know that. That's why for sale by owners exist. That's why low cost list brokerages exist where you just pay someone to put it on the MLS.
Yeah.
And Richard, I think your argument and that dialogue is still just completely sound, because it's really about representation. I mean, in dual agency, especially in these situations as a buyer's agent, it's not being properly represented by both sides. Because when you're a dual agent, there are certain things then that the agent will automatically pull back from and draw back from. We were at the broker tour yesterday, and he said, I've heard an agent say things like, oh, well, when I'm a dual agent, I don't talk about price. That's how I keep things clean. And it's like, isn't that the heart and the fiduciary to a client that to negotiate the price and the fees? And I think you're spot on with that dialogue. It still rings true.
Well, here's what I'll say, Hallie. I think with dual agency, number one, dual agency always makes me nervous. Consumers will sue you on dual agency far more than when you're representing one side. You'll get sued a lot more because they feel like there's a conflict of interest. You weren't represented properly. And here's the thing now where dual agency I think is really changing. Let's say the listing says, hey, we're going to pay 3% to the listing agent, nothing to the buyer's agent. So the buyer has no choice but to go to a listing agent, or even 2.5%, maybe even 2%. Will listing agents, and this is a big question mark, will listing agents still be okay with representing both sides and not making double the money like they were? Now they have double the liability. They have essentially double the work. They're going to all the physical inspections. They're doing much more now on both sides. Are they really going to be willing to risk that liability on both sides now with and not make any extra money? Like we're talking zero money to the buyer side, so the listing agent has no choice but to represent both sides. So then I think it goes back to the listing agent's conversation where, and we do a lot of FSBO calls. So I think the FSBO calls, it's going to mirror this, except it's going to be flipped, if you know what I'm saying. For sale by owners, actually, the vast majority of for sale by owners that I talk to, they're willing to actually pay a buyer's commission. They're like, oh no, I get it. I'm going to pay 3%. I'm going to pay 2% to a buyer. They're just trying to save money on the listing side. They're saying, no, I don't need a listing agent. I'll sell it myself. Now it's being flipped in a way. So I think the listing agent has to have this sort of conversation, Ali, where it's like, and we do this part already. It's going to change a little. It's like, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, in order to sell your home, I believe we need to get as many eyes on this property, which is online, and as many bodies through the door. If we get the more amount of buyers we accomplish with that, the higher likelihood your home will sell for more money and in less time. Is that what you want? And they say, yes, that is what I want. Okay, great. If we don't have the exposure, you're gonna have less bodies through the doors, less eyes on the property. Isn't that what we're trying to avoid? Yes, that is what I'm trying to avoid. Well, this is why I strongly suggest paying this much for a buyer's compensation. And I'm not gonna say, this is why I suggest you pay a buyer's compensation. I'm gonna say, I suggest 2.5% for a buyer's compensation, and here's why. You are going to increase your pool of buyers drastically by offering this buyer's compensation, which will in turn help you get more buyers on more eyes on the property, more buyers through the doors, and it's just going to, you'll have a higher likelihood of selling your home. And then the argument is, the way that kind of shifts is to, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, yes, buyers are looking through listings all the time on Zillow, Redfin. They're looking through it, but they're spending an average of 3 seconds on a listing. A lot of times, buyers need an agent to say, hey, I just found this property for you, Hallie. This looks like the right fit. Let's go take a look at it this weekend. What do you think about this one? And then when I ever say that to a buyer, they're like, oh, that's interesting. I did see that online, and I didn't even look twice at it. Okay, if you think I should look at it, then let's go. So the buyer's agent is also helping you sell the property, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller. So I'm letting them know that buyer's agent, in some ways indirectly, I don't know if we can say this or not, you are sort of hiring them. You're throwing, you're dangling a carrot saying, hey, please sell this property to your buyers. And so if you put them in that position, I guess, self-awareness, and get them to show that pain point. If we eliminate that entire pool of buyers agents and entire pool of buyers, your home may definitely sit on the market. So you're gonna have some listing agents talking to their sellers like, you know what? So we've had this past week, I've had 7 calls, and because you're not offering any compensation on the buyers, all 7 of them decided not to show the property. And it's not because the buyer's agent said, I'm not going to show this property because I'm not going to get paid. It's because the buyers can't afford to pay that compensation. They don't want to pay the compensation. It's the buyers are choosing not to see that property. Oh, they're not. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to pay this. Let's move on to the next. So that's going to have to be a conversation that you're going to have with your sellers now and educate them on that.
That's key right there, Richard. And just how, whether you offer buyer's compensation or you don't offer buyer's compensation as a seller, that's going to affect appraisal prices too. So there's going to be a lot of trickle down effects, because if you think about it, it's going to have to be something that I'm sure the appraisal industry will make concessions on when they are pricing a home. Because if you offer 2.5%, you have all these listings or all these buyer's agents helping try to get their buyers in there, you're going to have a multiple offer situation. We know statistically that shows that generally gets more of a price on a house when you have a bidding war, versus if you're not offering that, and now the buyers are having to literally come out of their pocket to pay for that themselves. They're going to offer less for the house. They have more expenses. It's just pure math. So, you just hit the nail right on the head right there with when it comes to the opportunity that you have too with your sellers to still allow it to function as it has been for many, many years, and make sure that they understand that price is negotiable, but help them to understand why it's important.
Yeah.
You don't just say it's 2.5. This is why I suggest you do 2.5. That was genius.
Well, the thing that, unfortunately, I think the real losers in all this are going to be those buyers that just can't afford to pay that. They're just right at that edge of being able to afford a house. And I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't know how a buyer is going to get around that. I don't know what's going to happen. And I was in commercial real estate for 5 years before moving to residential. We're used to this. We're used to commissions not being listed. And I just want to reassure everybody, I think you will see those 0% commissions to buyers. That you will see that, But the vast majority, I really believe you're still going to get paid. There will still be commissions offered. I really think so. And I've been
Mhm.
getting text messages from people, from friends of mine that know I'm in this business. They're like, "Hey, is everything gonna be okay? You gonna be able to
Right.
survive this?" Because they see the news headlines of 6% commissions are gone. And goodbye to those days. And I don't think it's just a matter of just how it's being presented. I think that's just really changing. So in commercial real estate, oh yeah, we would have to make the calls. Hey, what are you paying on this one? 3%, nice. 2.5%, 2%, and we would just have that conversation. It was nothing. This isn't really anything new to the real estate business. Now, one thing that I think is going to be new is really that buyer representation agreement, because we didn't do that in commercial either. We just showed properties. And I think this is going to be, well, this is going to be great. If you're ready to step up, you're going to do really, really well in this business. And now you almost have to treat your buyers like FISBOs in a sense, too. It's
Mhm.
just flipped.
Mhm.
So if you've been working on FISBOs, this should be an easy conversation for you, because FISBOs are all about trying to save money, you know?
Yeah, I love that, Richard. So, speaking of the buyer broker agreement, shifting back to that a little bit, how is it that you maybe approach that with your clients since you've been implementing this for a while? What are your scripts and dialogues you're using right now to get that tie down and to get that contract signed?
Great question. It's so hard to, and I don't even mind. So my team, we've been doing buyer role plays over the last couple of weeks where we're grading each other. We're setting the clock, we're doing a role play, and then we grade each other, we give each other feedback. I don't mind doing this for other people too if they want to just watch and they want me to grade them, and that's totally cool with me. But number one, role play the entire presentation.
Yes.
And we have a structure on our presentation. The structure is so important. Don't just sit there and just hope that you're going to get a thing signed at the end. It's very intentional. We have tie downs throughout the entire presentation. I'm tying them down. I'm giving trial closes, giving slot. I'm closing them throughout so that when it comes to them signing it, it's almost a no-brainer. They're like, okay, now here's what we're going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go backwards too, if that's okay with you, Hallie.
Of course,
When I
yeah.
get to the closing though, the mindset is so important of how you present the document. If I'm sitting in front of you, Hallie, I'm going to say, well, Hallie, here's what we're going to do next. Here's a buyer representation agreement. And before we sign, do me a favor. Can you just check the spelling of your name? Is this spelled correctly? Okay, good. I just want to make sure. And if this was listing, I would say, and is this the address? Is the address correct? That's a tie down right there. I'm getting
Hmm.
them to now think about uh, the name, the spelling of their name, rather than am I going to be signing this or not? Should I sign it or not? I'm thinking getting them away from that thought and go. And Hallie, would you like me to explain this line by line, paragraph by paragraph, or do you want me to just, highlight the key points? Because there's some stuff in there that probably is not going to apply to you, but I'm more than happy to do it the other way. They usually say no to that. They don't want to sit there for an hour, and
Hmm.
we go through the key parts, and you have to just command it. You have to just say, okay, here we go. Sign here, initial here. There you go. Awesome. But before that, the tie downs have to be in place. So I'm tying them down throughout it, such as, well, Hallie, you need to move in the next 3 months. Why is that important to you? Okay, I understand. Okay, then we're going to make that a priority for you. Okay, you need to be you want your kids in that school district? Well, okay, that's going to be a priority for me. And what do you know about the deposit? Because that's a lot of money. You should know everything about that and what happens to that amount of money. You don't know? Okay, well, let me explain, because that's going to be very important for you to know. So I'm tying them down throughout that whole thing. And it's a typical sales thing, It's you discover their pain points,
Hmm.
you let them sit in the pain, and then you offer the solution. Well, we're going to get you out of that pain uh, that you're in. We'll get you into a home. We'll make sure. And yesterday I do a under contract consultation too. As soon as I open escrow with the buyer, that same day, I try to do it that same day. We have another consultation, and we do it on Zoom. I record it and I tell them the next steps. And yesterday I just did one with the buyer that I opened an escrow with, and he asked me, I think, oh, by the way, I know this is a little awkward, but what is your fee with all this? And how do I pay it? And he was ready to. He was ready. I don't know, and you get a lot of that. That'll happen too, where buyers think, oh, they don't know how the system works. They think that they need to pay for it. Or maybe he heard about these cases. Now he thought that this was already in play. So that, I mean, that's gonna be, you just, your buyer presentation has to be so much better. And Hallie, if I could just include this one thing, I
Of
don't know if you
course.
guys are on a Redfin mailing list. I mean, Redfin will email me all the time about the value of my home and this and that. The president of Redfin just sent out this email blast saying now's a better time than ever to choose a Redfin agent to sell your property. Because now that buyer commissions are going away, I don't know if you use those exact words. Now's the best time to use a Redfin agent because Redfin is the #1 real estate website for buyers to go on and search for their homes. And great, 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 great. Well, the funny thing about that, Hallie, is that hasn't changed. I mean, that's always been Redfin's model. Sell with the Redfin agent, and we'll have the best exposure. That's always been their model. But now they've kind of smart, if you ask me, but they've used that as a marketing tool to say, now's the best time to use a Redfin agent. Well, now here's a question. Why aren't we doing that with our database? Now is a better time than ever to hire an agent to represent you in the purchase of your home. We should be blasting that out, and we're actually working on an email like that for our team this weekend to draft an email such along those lines. And this is why it's so important for you as a buyer's agent. I would be scared if you had to go dual agency. Wow, if you had to hire that listing agent that's on the other side, wow, that thought scares me. You need to hire a buyer's agent. You have to deliver that message.
Richard, you did, it's so good the way that you just described that because, other companies, especially the discount brokers, are going to capitalize on the fear. As confused or we are, imagine being a buyer, let's say even a first-time home buyer or someone considering selling this year and hearing the news and seeing what's on social media, and they are just as confused as we are. They want to make sure that they're not going to get in trouble. They want to make sure that they're being protected and safe. Of course, value might be a part of the conversation, but we also need to be the harbingers of that information to our clients and to our database of how does this affect them? We're talking about how it
Yeah,
affects us. We're very, we're being very like almost narcissists at this point. How does this affect
yeah.
me and my business? But we're not talking about how it affects the consumers. So be that voice and send out those things like Richard said to databases. That's just wonderful.
Well, Hallie, we had a call yesterday or 2 days ago, I'm sorry, where the seller said, "Why should I list now when I can just wait until July and not pay a buyer's commission?" That's what a seller is now thinking, and you're gonna get. I'm hearing a lot of people say. I think many mentioned that too, and we had that exact objection 2 days ago with with Tony on our team. And the truth is, you could do that now. You
Right.
technically don't have to pay a buyer's commission. Why? I would respond. He's like, how would you respond? Why I would respond? Well, why don't you do that now, Mr. Seller? You could actually do that now, but let me share with you. Can I share with you what that's going to look like if you eliminate that entire buyer's pool? And we get an average of about 45 to 50 expired listings in our market every single day. And a lot of them, they did not have a strong buyer's pool that were seeing their property. And here's another, I'll say this. We better be ready for this kind of objection when we're talking with our buyers now. Will you lower your commission?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that
Yes.
was only a
Credit.
objection from
Yep.
sellers.
Lower commission. Give me a credit. Absolutely. Yep.
Will you give me a credit? Oh, we want to interview more agents before we sign with you. Got to be, those are the seller objections that we were getting. We got to be ready now to hear that from buyers.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's been so long that we're forgetting not only did it just change to zero compensation with NAR, but before that it was as little as $1 for so many years, so I think that you're right. It's all about perspective and
Yeah.
education and opportunity here. And those that are leaning into this and practicing scripts and dialogues, how fluently you said those words, Richard, going through your process is we have to adopt this same tenacity to now our buyers consultations and then also our listing, consultations.
Yeah.
That's a very valid situation that came up. So speaking of script and role play, Richard, you have an open script and role play 2 days a week that you give the offices, correct? Which days are those?
Yeah, so it's 3 days a week,
3
Tuesdays,
days.
Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. And it's kind of neat because my maps coach started it, and she just had me take over, which is totally cool. And we have about 10 to 15 agents showing up, but they're from all over the country, not just here. And we actually have quite a few non-KW agents now showing up to it. So it's a great opportunity to show them who we are and what we're doing here. But if I could even just plug it in into everybody here, this is my Facebook page of called Real Estate Agent Roleplay. I started it a couple months ago, and yeah, I'm trying to post some more content on there to help us with this whole thing. And so I'm gonna post up a lot more videos on what the kind of conversations that I'm now gonna start having with sellers and buyers. It's just gonna change. You just have to be really good at it now.
Mm-hmm. And
Now's
and
the
Bob,
more than ever before.
yeah, and please join Richard on those 3 days. Bob, you make a good point because of confused buyers. I think prices may go down in July. A little bit of advice. I love numbers. I think that it's a really valid, especially if you guys are sitting across from the table from someone who is more of an analytical person. Start tracking those, particularly if you work in a farm. If a listing offers 0% commission, start tracking the prices. Is it getting price reductions? Is it going under market value? Is it blah, blah, blah? Like start tracking that data so we can use that when we sit across from the table at a listing presentation and say, look, Mr. Seller, we've seen the data that sellers that are not offering a buyer's commission are on average receiving 20 grand less per
Yep.
transaction. Is this something that's worth you saving an extra $500-600 here when you're getting less value for your home? So it's something that something that we should be a part of. Bob, you make a great point. Who knows how it's going to affect, no one has a crystal ball, but what we can control and what we can affect is how we react and how we start educating ourselves to be the top of the market, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Richard, any other thoughts you'd like to share with us?
No, I mean hopefully I covered a lot. I mean, it's really gonna be like you're contacting a FISBO, I think. A FISBO is trying to save half the commission, and that's the thing. I really think all of us here, if we're ready for it and we're practicing our and role playing, we've got this. We've got this. We can, I give an example to our team. Look, when the pandemic happened, who the cream rises to the top. What happened with Zoom versus Skype? Everybody knew what Skype was. Nobody knew what Zoom was. You know why Zoom rose to the top? They knew how to do business meetings. They were
Mhm.
able to adapt and make it very easy for business meetings, knowing that people were working from home and executives, agents, salespeople, they needed to use Zoom now, and they completely adapted to business meetings, school meetings, easy to send files. Skype was very difficult to do that. I was all about Skype before. I didn't even know what Zoom was. But because Zoom adapted to the current the climate, there you go.
Yeah.
It's all about Zoom. The cream rises to the top.
It's so true. There's so much that can be had in this market, and I love that. Some people had dropped in the chat where Richard teach a class. Just to let you guys know, Richard is a part of. We are putting together a very special task force here within all of our offices with some of our top agents and contributors and people involved with CAR and NAR to really mastermind and come together with solutions. As of right now, we are offering the script and role play. Please attend that with Richard. But as this task force starts to evolve and as they start to meet, we're going to bring a lot more value proposition to you guys, even more so of very specific classes and things like that that we think are going to be of value, scripts that we use, etc. So thank you, Richard, so much for
Yeah.
joining me.
There is a class coming though, Hallie. We talked about the regional meeting yesterday. We are Jen and Erica Hill and I were working on a Zoom class. I think second week of April, first week of April. So I'm trying to craft a class just to put all my crazy thoughts in in some sort of order about all this because I was just kind of it's like just a mental vomit of all these thoughts. But we are gonna put a class together on what you should be saying to your buyers and sellers with all this.
That's awesome. Thank you. And we're going to make sure that everyone's informed for that. I love that. Thank you guys
Oh, thank
again.
you guys. Thanks for the
Great
kind words.
Friday. Reach out to me, reach out to Richard, Richard Chung, ALC member, badass, Veritas Group Rainmaker. Reach out to him. We're here to help you guys. We want to help see you succeed. If you're unsure about what to say to your clients, we've got your back. Okay. Have a good
All
weekend,
right,
guys.
thanks, Ali, for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, guys.